There are parents like that I love meeting where we can have that connection in a matter of minutes. Hello, welcome to The Rare Life. I'm your host, Madeline Cheney. It is solo time. Today, I am super excited to talk about isolation and connection in special needs parenting. It is a big one. It applies to virtually everyone in this journey in one way or another. For me, there has been this constant dance between the two mindsets of isolation, like no one gets it, and feelings of connection, like, oh my gosh, she gets it. And of all the things that are hard about Kimball's journey and his struggles medically, I think the isolation that can come with it is one of the hardest parts about it. But the connection that I've been able to experience because of it has been one of the best parts of it. So it really is this juxtaposition of isolation and connection to be a special needs parent. In the iconic poem by Emily Pearl Kingsley called Welcome to Holland, she talks about what it's like to have a child with different needs. And I think most of us have read it at one point or another. We received it along with some other papers when we first found out about Kimball's diagnosis when I was pregnant with him. But I'm going to read it again because I feel like it encapsulates the different world we live in from our friends and family that don't have children with different needs. This is Welcome to Holland by Emily Pearl Kingsley. I am often asked to describe the experience of raising a child with a disability, to try to help people who have not shared that unique experience to understand it, to imagine how it would feel. It's like this. When you're going to have a baby, it's like planning a fabulous vacation trip to Italy. You buy a bunch of guidebooks and make your wonderful plans. The Colosseum, the Michelangelo David, the gondolas in Venice. You may learn some handy phrases in Italian. It's all very exciting. After months of eager anticipation, the day finally arrives. You pack your bags and off you go. Several hours later, the plane lands. The stewardess comes in and says, "Welcome to Holland." Holland, you say? What do you mean Holland? I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy. All my life I've dreamed of going to Italy. But there's been a change in the flight plan. They've landed in Holland, and there you must stay. The important thing is that they haven't taken you to a horrible, disgusting, filthy place full of pestilence, famine, and disease. It's just a different place. So you must go out and buy new guidebooks, and you must learn a whole new language, and you will meet a whole new group of people you would never have met. It's just a different place. It's slower paced than Italy, less flashy than Italy. But after you've been there for a while and you catch your breath, you look around, and you begin to notice that Holland has windmills. And Holland has tulips. Holland even has Rembrandts. But everyone you know is busy coming and going from Italy, and they're all bragging about what a wonderful time they had there. And for the rest of your life, you will say, yes, that's where I was supposed to go. That's what I had planned. And the pain of that will never, ever, ever, ever go away, because the loss of that dream is a very, very significant loss. But if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't go to Italy, you may never be free to enjoy the very special, the very lovely things about Holland. So I feel like that sets the tone really well to talk about connection and isolation. This episode is about the other people in Holland with us and those in Italy. My first experience with isolation in the special needs world came immediately after finding out about Kimball's differences. I was confused and I was hurt and I was grieving, and I felt so alone. I called each of my family members, and it was really comforting to talk to them, but I couldn't get over the fact that they didn't understand what it felt like to get that news. They couldn't tell me what it was going to be like. They couldn't give me tips for taking care of Kimball like they gave me when Wendy was born. They didn't know. They'd never been through it. Not even my own parents had been through it. And that was a really scary feeling. It was scary that they didn't understand. And of course, that also permeated into my group of friends. Even my closest friends didn't understand. And I felt so other. I was in a different club than them all of a sudden. I was thrust into it. And I didn't want that. I didn't want that separation. And I felt super alone. It was intense and it was dark. I suddenly noticed how different their lives were from mine and how it would remain that way forever, which is not false. That is a true statement. Unless one of them has a child with medical conditions, we will go our whole lives without being able to totally connect on that level. And that makes me sad. It still makes me sad. And again, it is so scary to realize that my own mother didn't know what it was going to be like, and she couldn't help me navigate that from her own experience, like she could for so many other things. A good example of this I shared in episode 13, but it was when my mom and Justin's mom, in 2 different times, they were taking care of Kimball and needed to give him a tube feeding. And these 2 very capable, amazing women that I look up to so much were scared. They were afraid to give him his tube feed because it's intense. I had typed up 2 pages of instructions on how to do that. And it was intimidating, as it was for us the first few times. But it was so strange to have these women that I look up to that can do anything were intimidated by that. That was another time that I really felt that isolation. There also have been times with my family when they'll say something and I'll squirm and be like, oh, don't say that, because it is a sensitive topic within our community and to me personally, but they have no idea. And it feels a bit lonely. It feels a bit lonely to be like, oh my gosh, did you just say that? And it's not like they're callous and these mean people. They just don't even think about it. So one example of that was when we were just chatting about childbirth and having girl talk. And both my sisters said, oh, but when they lay that baby on your chest, it's all worth it. When they said that, I just felt so other and so different because, of course, Kimball wasn't placed on my chest after he was born. He was thrown through the little drive-through window in our labor and delivery room into the NICU. And I know that's the case for many, many parents with kids with medical issues. And sometimes I'll kind of forget that we're in 2 different worlds, really. And it's times like those that reality hits me again. And I remember that our worlds are so different. In the first year or so after Kimball was born, I couldn't really get over that disconnect with my family and friends. I just was constantly thinking, oh, you don't understand. You don't get this. I feel so alone. And there were things that I didn't tell them. I didn't tell them very much of what was going on with us and with Kimball and how much we were struggling. And they didn't find out until listening to my solo episodes. And when I recorded them, I wanted them to hear it. It's not like I didn't want them to hear. And my sister was like, Maddie, why didn't you tell us this was going on? Why didn't you tell us about how hard this was? So I was really thinking about, why didn't I tell them? Why didn't I talk about this more? And I realized that I avoided sharing it because it made me feel more isolated, because I knew they wouldn't understand as I was telling them, and it would only highlight how different our worlds were and how they didn't get it. And now I've come to realize that sharing it actually helps invite them into my world. And they will probably never totally understand what it's like, but they can at least come and visit me in my world as I tell them more about the hard things and the awesome things and just things about Kimball. Teaching them things that I have learned and just little insights into the medical world has been really bonding. I really like it. They probably get kind of bored with it, but I really like explaining things. And I really like it when they ask questions about Kimball and about his differences, because I'm proud of him. I'm proud of this community I'm a part of, and it's really fun to invite them in. So I'm learning to share our wins and to share our heartbreaks with them. Even if they don't totally get it, I'm learning to open up with that kind of thing with them so we can still have that connection. I also have learned to connect over hard things. We do not have a corner on difficult things. And I think that realization has been really helpful to me, because I realize I can bond with my family and my friends, or just sharing hard things that we're going through. And that can be super connecting. And really, that's something that we have in common with every person on this planet. is that we all are facing something hard. And they may be very different things, but we are all facing hard things. And I think that capitalizing on that can be really helpful. I try to remind myself to do that. It doesn't come super naturally, but recognizing the commonality we have in struggle, I think, is really awesome and really bonding. So I have also felt isolation within the special needs community. And I don't know how common that is, but I will share my experience with it. When I was about 20 weeks along with Kimball and we had the anatomy scan, we were given a misdiagnosis of Down syndrome. And that lasted for about a week. But in that week, I threw myself into the community. I wanted to learn everything I could about it and to see other parents doing it, being a parent of a child with Down syndrome. And I was excited to see lots of smiling faces. And I was excited to be a part of that community. But a week later, when my blood test came negative for all the most common chromosomal issues, we didn't know exactly what it was yet, but we knew it was very rare because it did not come up positive for any of the other syndromes. So when we eventually had Kimball's official diagnosis of chondrodysplasia punctata X-linked type 1, it didn't bring much comfort or community because it's so incredibly rare. And I think, there's isolation in the special needs community, but when you add rare on top of that, and especially ultra rare, it just makes the isolation that much more magnified. And Kimball's condition has 125 other known cases worldwide. So it is very rare. And yet there are others I've met with maybe a dozen other kids with that syndrome or undiagnosed. They have no one to relate with. And so, the rare community is an awesome community to be a part of, but you still don't have those people that are your people that have the same syndrome. And so eventually I did find a Facebook group for CDPX1, and that was really awesome. That was so awesome, but it took a while. And so that isolation, it can be really hard. It can feel isolating even from other people within the special needs community. So suddenly I felt every time I see a post on Instagram or I see a person with Down syndrome, I feel this little jerk in my heart of, oh, that's that community I was a part of for a week and I got booted out because my son didn't have it. And the rareness feels extra painful. One of my downfalls has been that I've searched for a person who will truly get it when there really isn't anyone who will. Justin is the closest person I will ever get to finding someone who totally gets it. And I think that I've kind of had an isolating mindset because of that. So even going to different parent conferences, I would look around the room and be like, we're the only ones here with XYZ. So for an example, at the deaf blind parent conference, which you would think that's very specific, deaf and blind. And there was a handful of parents from the whole state, children 0 to 21. And as we were introducing ourselves, it felt like every single person was saying that their child had charge syndrome, which is a very rare syndrome. But just seeing that again, like, oh, everyone here has the same syndrome except for Kimball. We are still other. Even here, I feel other. I feel left out. And that has happened with many different conferences, like even just the deaf conference that we went to, and seeing that all the parents there had kids with only deafness and not the medical complexities. So each of these conferences where they're created to feel connection, and I did feel connection, but I also felt very lonely while we were there because I was comparing our exact scenario with everyone else's and noticing how we didn't fit in. And even with other kids who have the exact same syndrome on that Facebook group for CDPX1, I find myself noticing the kids that have it a little bit worse or a little bit less, or combined with other chromosomal abnormalities. And so I'm even comparing Kimball and our situation against other parents with children with the same syndrome and feeling isolated, which is really frustrating that I do that. And I've tried to work on that. and I have made progress. And then in general, on social media especially, sometimes I feel like Kimball doesn't have enough disabilities. Like, man, their child is way more disabled, so I don't feel connection with them. Or, man, Kimball's too disabled. He has way more issues than that child, so I don't feel connection with them. And so this has definitely been something that I've struggled with mindset-wise. But I have also felt a huge connection within the special needs community when I'm able to put the comparing aside and focus on the similarities and commonalities. It is the most wonderful, exhilarating, thrilling feeling to meet another parent and be able to say, I get it, and to hear them say the same thing. Because while my actual family will always be wonderful and irreplaceable, other parents in the special needs community and world have become family in and of themselves. They're my people. They're the ones who really understand my world because we live in it together. And like I said in the beginning, that connection has been in stark contrast to the isolation that also comes along with it. It is this thrilling, wonderful feeling. And I feel the most incredible connection with parents who get it more than my own family can ever get it. One way that I feel that connection is by focusing on commonalities within different diagnoses. So things like, oh, my child has a hearing loss too. Or, oh, Kimball's G-tube fed also. Things like that have been really awesome when I can look at other diagnoses, and especially when there are other rare diagnoses, and to find, birth defects or medical struggles that Kimball also has, because then we can connect over that. Before Kimball was born, I've never experienced the kind of instant and deep connection that I have with other moms since Kimball's born. I've met these moms in the libraries, in waiting rooms at doctors' offices or the hospital, at early intervention meetups. And this one time in particular comes to mind, and for some reason, it really stands out to me, but we were going into the hospital outpatient services for Kimball's feeding therapy. And in the waiting room, there was another mom with a son that looked around the same age, and she looked really excited and said, oh, he has hearing aids. And we started chatting about how both our sons had deafness. And she was super excited, and I was super excited, and she was asking me about hearing aids because her son was going to have hearing aids before getting cochlear implants. And she was asking how they go, and I was so excited to talk to her and tell her all about it. And then her name got called and she had to go into her appointment. And so we parted ways, and as I left, I was feeling so bummed that we had that cut off, because even just that 2-minute conversation was so energizing to me. And it was awesome. She was this total stranger. And yet I felt this deep connection with her because we could relate. I think that the fact that neither of us can relate with I'm assuming for her, with our family and friends, I think that makes the connection that much sweeter and more wonderful. And I still to this day wish I would have grabbed her name and number so we could become at least social media friends. But there are parents like that I love meeting, where we can have that connection in a matter of minutes. And there have been many times like that. And even on Instagram, as Jess talked about in episode 38, Instagram has been really awesome for me to kind of learn how to use as a tool within the special needs community. And I've had this deep connection with parents who I've never met. And that's been really cool, especially in the age of COVID, when physical gatherings are limited. But even then, just being able to connect with so many parents who get it has been awesome. It's just so wonderful to read a post. I love those raw, real, honest ones when I'm reading through and I'm like, oh, you articulate this so well. It's something I didn't even realize I was feeling until I read it, and I knew that it was true for me too. I just love that feeling of being able to read others' thoughts on there. It just really builds the feeling of community with other parents who get it. if you don't have an Instagram account yet, I highly recommend creating one, even just to be able to find other parents, because you can search hashtags. So hashtag hearing aids or hashtag hypotonia, or even the syndrome itself. You can search that and you can find other parents who are talking about it and follow them and become friends. So in conclusion, if you have that constant battle between the two mindsets of isolation and connection, I can totally relate. And I think it's just something that comes along with the territory. But I am so grateful for that deep connection that I've experienced because of this journey that we're on. And I'm so grateful for the things that I've learned from other parents and for the hope that I've felt in seeing their stories and seeing them do well with their children and do well on their journey. It's been very inspiring. And each of you, my wonderful listeners, are a part of that amazing community. And I'm so grateful that we live in a day and age when we can find connection with other parents that live across the world or across the country. And that distance is no issue. And I'm very proud of my fellow citizens of Holland. You can follow me on Instagram at the_rare_life to hear about episodes being released and my musings about life with Kimball, so we can connect with each other. Let's build that community. If you are a parent of Rare, join our Facebook group called Parents of Children with Rare Conditions. Yes, another way to connect. I'll put a link for that in the show notes. Additional to this podcast, I also facilitate a support group for special needs moms of all kinds through the nonprofit organization We Are Brave Together, whose founder I interviewed in season 2, episodes 31 and 32. Jessica is awesome. We Are Brave Together is there to let us know as special needs parents that we are not alone. And I love that mission. They offer support groups, virtual classes, and retreats, and it's all for free. There's a link in the show notes if you want to join that community of special needs moms from all over the country. Join me next week for the story of Levi, an 11-year-old who beat pediatric brain cancer as a toddler with the lovely Kara Riska. Don't miss it. See you then.